Welcome back, fancy folks. This is your host, the Fanciest Man of Cornwood, and I am back tonight with our deck tech for this Tuesday. And tonight we're going to look at one of the new commanders from Foundations. This is a monocolored commander that I was actually surprised is really inexpensive to put together, a pretty powerful deck, and definitely one that will frustrate your opponents. So we're going to look at Fumulus, the Infestation. For 3 and a black, this is a 2/2 legendary creature vampire insect. Has flying and death touch. Whenever a player sacrifices a non-token creature, create a 1/1 black insect creature token with flying. And whenever an insect, leech, slug, or worm you control attacks, defending player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So if you were one of the people that voted on the poll this week, thank you so much. We had actually a tie. So I'll be doing a second deck tech at some point this week for Kiora as well. But Fumulus is a fun commander because really we have a very straightforward strategy that we're going to be using that tends to just overwhelm opponents with value. It's one of my favorite ways to play commander, where we're just trying to get a bigger and bigger board state. We want to do things that our deck just kind of naturally flows into, which is sacrificing creatures, getting effects from that, and then having sack outlets out to even sacrifice more creatures and kind of make more tokens and more value out of that. So let's look at our strategy overview first. Of course, it starts with Fumulus. This is a deck that's going to want our commander on the field as much as possible, not just so we can be getting those insects, but also so that every time we attack with our swarm of them that we're going to be building, we're making a pretty big life swing, hopefully to each opponent, but at least to one opponent if we can kind of alpha strike and send them all at one opponent. So the way we're going to make most of those insects, or at least a lot of those insects, is by playing these creatures that come in, and whenever they enter the battlefield, each player needs to sacrifice a creature. Black has access to a bunch of these guys, and as my play group can tell you, they can be rather nasty, especially if you have ways like Machias here, which is our last card in the overview, that can actually bring them back out another time and just kind of keep that engine going. We can get multiple insects every time we play one of these guys if we're lucky. And even if an opponent has tokens or something like that, we're still going to be getting benefits like Zulaport Cutthroat, like Blood Artist, like all of those cards that we all kind of know and love. Whenever a creature dies, we get to ping an opponent, or we get to actually drain a life from an opponent, which is even better because it just makes our life total higher and higher. All right, so one thing I want to look at first are, of course, these other creatures and then other effects that can help our opponents sacrifice their non-token creatures and make us more and more insects. We'll start with a Cursed Marauder for 1 and a black. This is a 2/1 creature zombie warrior. And when it comes into the battlefield, each player sacrifices a non-token creature. So a Cursed Marauder is actually probably our best option out of these. It's very cheap. Hopefully we're getting 4 non-token creatures sacked across the battlefield, which means 4 insects, and it just makes the swarm bigger and bigger almost immediately. It kind of can double or help our swarm get much, much bigger. And then we have Dictate of Erebos for 3 and 2 black. This is an enchantment with flash, and whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So obviously if we can get this out and then start playing our Cursed Marauder or our Fleshbag Marauder, things like that, then we'll actually be doubling and maybe even tripling up on how many creatures are getting sacked each turn, which just makes more and more of those likely to be non-tokens and get us those insects. Fleshbag Marauder is for 2 and a black, a 3/1 creature zombie warrior, and it has the exact same effect as a Cursed Marauder. Each player has to sacrifice a creature when it enters the battlefield. Demon's Disciple is a bit different for 2 and a black. This is a 3/1 creature human cleric, and when it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. So generally, if we're playing opponents that are playing planeswalkers, I think we're going to be okay with kind of trading off getting that insect for getting rid of a planeswalker, especially one that has a powerful emblem or something like that. We love seeing those come off the board. All right, next we're going to look at some ways to make a lot of tokens really easily in black. The first one is a much older card. Actually, a couple of these are older cards that just have a nostalgic place in my heart, but also can catch opponents off guard if they're not used to seeing some cards like this. So we'll start with Carrion for 1 and 2 black. This is an instant. Sacrifice a creature, put into play a number of, it says maggots here, but you're actually going to put into play a number of insect tokens equal to the sacrifice creature's power. Treat those tokens as 0/1 black creatures. So if you go to Oracle, which is the official kind of updated rules text of all the Magic cards out there, you'll notice that this does make insects now, which is obviously really, really nice to have, because even though they're 0/1s, if we're going to go for an Alpha Strike or something like that, we can still sack one of our larger creatures to this and then get a bunch of triggers from our commander's second ability whenever we attack. Next, we've got Indrik Sar, Master Breeder for 4 and a black. This is a 2/2 legendary creature human wizard. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create X 1/1 black Thrall creature tokens, where X is that spell's mana value. And when we control 7 or more Thralls, we have to sacrifice Indrik Sar. So we're really not too worried about that second ability. By the time we have close to 7, we should have some sack outlets out where we can start sacrificing these Thralls for value. But Indrik is great because if you can avoid the second ability, then obviously you're just going to have kind of this endless supply of Thralls to throw at all your sacrifice effects and things like that. Next is Snake Basket for 4. This is an artifact that was originally printed back in Visions, which is one of the reasons I love it, because I love these older cards. It has X, sacrifice Snake Basket, put X Cobra tokens into play. Treat these tokens as 1/1 green creatures and play this ability as a sorcery. So even though we have to sink some mana into this, we are running kind of some classic ways in black to get a lot of mana, like the Cabal Coffers and Urborg combo. So it's possible we're going to have a turn where we have, 6, 7, maybe even more mana just kind of lying around. And this is a great way to make that mana worth it and kind of throw it at something. If we can get our Maskwood Nexus out, which we'll see in a different section of the video, then that's going to make all these snakes every creature type, and that could be very lethal for our opponent as well if all of these tokens are triggering that second ability on Fumulus. Next, we've got Wriggling Grub for 1 and a black. This is a 1/1 creature worm, so this will trigger Fumulus. And then when Wriggling Grub dies, create 2 1/1 black and green worm creature tokens. So what we're really interested in here is for a very cheap cost, we get a creature that's great to sacrifice to our sacrifice outlets, but then also over time is going to provide us with 3 worm bodies that we can throw at opponents that are hopefully at lower life totals or something like that, and just get that value from our commander. All right, next let's look at some of those sacrifice outlets that I've been talking about, because obviously in a deck like this, those are really important. We need to have at least one of these out that we can use, hopefully once a turn, if not more. And then we also have one thrown in here that just helps us kind of get our engine accelerating. So first we have Phyrexian Altar. For 3, this is an artifact. Sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any color. If you've ever played against this card or with it, as soon as we have this out in one of our Zulaport Cutthroat, Blood Artist type creatures that are pinging opponents, or even an effect like Bastion of Remembrance that pings an opponent, this gets really silly with Phyrexian Altar. If we have this out in a way to draw cards, then we can have some pretty monster turns where we're just churning out creature tokens, drawing cards, making more creature tokens, and repeating it over and over and over. Next, we have Vampiric Rites for 1 black. This is an enchantment. And then for 1 generic and a black, and sacrificing a creature, we gain 1 life and draw a card. This is actually from Foundations. It's uncommon, so it's going to be nice and cheap and really readily available. Not just for this deck, but really for any black deck that's interested in sacrificing creatures. This is great because even though we have other sack outlets that are going to draw us cards, this one is repeatable. We don't have to tap anything, so as long as we have the mana, we can keep sacking our tokens and drawing those cards. Next, we have Saw in Half for 2 generic and a black. This is an instant. Destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copies of that creature, except their power is half that creature's power, and their toughness is half that creature's toughness. Round up each time. So you can use this to kill an opponent's creature. However, I think most of us that saw this card when it came out back in Infinity originally. We're just kind of enamored with the thought of what we want to put in our deck to make 2 copies of for ourselves, and that's exactly what we want to do here. We'd love to have some kind of creatures out that are going to trigger and drain our opponents as we're doing this, but there are tons of creatures in this deck that we would benefit from doubling up on copies of. So as soon as we can get a good target for that, that's a great way to kind of cap off a turn cycle and do right before our turn. And really, some of the best targets for this are Zulaport Cutthroat, Blood Artist, the creatures that are going to be draining every time a creature dies. It's really nice to get a second copy of those out. All right, and we'll end this particular section with Ravenous Amulet for 2 generic. This is an artifact. For 1 generic and tapping it and sacrificing a creature, we can draw a card and put a soul counter on this artifact. Activate only as a sorcery. So that's great. For 1 generic, we're basically drawing a card because we'll have so many tokens to throw at this. And then for 4 generic and tapping it, sacrifice this artifact. Each opponent loses life equal to the number of soul counters on the artifact. So again, this isn't uncommon from Foundations. I think it'll be really easy to get a hold of. But this is great because it just gives us incremental value every turn cycle where we're kind of converting a token into a card. And then, with the way we're kind of pinging opponents over time with our commander's second ability, we should have opponents getting to lower life totals fairly quickly. And so being able to pay for, sack this, and then deal or cause each opponent to lose maybe 5 or 6 life, something like that, really could mean something in a deck like this where we need those just kind of over time losses of life for our opponents. All right, and then this last section is really just to look at some of the stuff that's thrown into the deck. It's not one particular theme. Some of these are ways to hopefully finish off opponents. Some of them are just cool cards that benefit from our creatures dying and things like that. So let's take a look first at Drana, Liberator of Malakir for 1 generic and 2 black. This is a 2/3 legendary creature vampire ally. She has flying and first strike. Whenever Drana deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control. So I put Drana in the deck because I think it pairs really well with all these small flying insect tokens we're making. Hopefully it's going to double up the damage from all of those tokens during an attack or something like that. And I think in that way she fits great in the deck. Next we have Lightning Coils for 3 generic. This is an artifact. Whenever a non-token creature you control is put into a graveyard from play, put a charge counter on Lightning Coils. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Lightning Coils has 5 or more charge counters on it, remove all of them from it and put that many 3/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste into play. Remove them from the game at end of turn. So this is just an older card that I think fits really well with Fumulus, since his first ability is looking specifically for non-token creatures to die, and we're playing a bunch of creatures that can come into play and just immediately sacrifice themselves or sacrifice another non-token creature we control for value. This just seemed like a great fit. Whenever this second ability goes off, then that's going to give us 5 more bodies where we can either attack with those and hopefully help finish off an opponent, or we can use one of our sacrifice outlets to get even more value from those tokens. All right, next we have Maskwood Nexus for 4 generic. This is an artifact. Creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. And then for 3 generic and tapping it, we can create a 2/2 blue shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. So that token will be every creature type. Obviously, this is fantastic with Fumulus. We're going to be able to trigger that second ability with any attacking creature, and it just helps kind of speed things up in the deck and smooth things out. All right, last we have Massacre Worm for 3 generic and 3 black. This is a 6/5 creature Phyrexian Worm. When this creature enters, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature an opponent control dies, that player loses 2 life. So what we're interested in here is really that second line of text, because we're going to be having all these creatures come in and force our opponents to sacrifice creatures, things like that. We just love being able to have each opponent lose 2, or have that opponent lose 2 life every time one of their creatures dies. So the first ability is also really good. If they're trying to run tokens, then this can get those tokens out of the way and hopefully kind of get their sacrifice fodder off their battlefield, so that our creatures are even more effective at getting to their non-token creatures. It is ironic and kind of funny to me that we're including this in the deck, and it's a worm, but it's got a U instead of an O. So I don't think this is actually going to trigger Fumulus' second ability, but still a great inclusion in the deck, and really a card that if the board state is big enough and we have enough ways to make our opponent sacrifice creatures, this can even be a finisher in the deck as well. All right, thank you guys for sticking around. I really appreciate everyone that comes in and watches these videos. Just means a lot to me that people seem to be getting something out of it. So if you want to check the description, there will be a link there to this deck that also kind of links up to my overall Archidekt page, which you can also see at the bottom left of the screen. That will have every deck that's been included in deck techs in the channel so far. And then it will also include any decks that we make in the future. We're also going to be putting those into Archidekt. So one thing I'd love to hear from y'all is just comment if you have a favorite creature type that you don't think gets quite enough recognition here in Commander. Maybe one that you've built a deck around and just kind of treasure it because it's an uncommon creature type or something like that. I think Foundations did a good job of bringing those to the limelight a little bit, but I'd love to hear what you guys think also needs some more love after Foundations. If you like the content, of course, give me a like and subscribe. That really helps the channel out, helps me kind of get the motivation to keep making videos. And then also, if you want to check out the channel's community tab, we will have polls going up. We actually did one of those to get ideas for this deck, and then there will be another up tonight for the decks that deck that I'm going to work on for next week. So again, thank you guys so much if you stuck around. I appreciate it, and keep playing Commander.